What's going on? Welcome to the three energy systems and everything you need to know. Obviously, you know this by now. My name's Kenny, and I'm going to talk you through everything you need to know about training the energy systems. So first off, let's talk about the mistakes that people make with their conditioning. One of the things I get commonly is like when I talk about, developing the certain systems, things like that, I'll have people just be like, you just have to work harder. And there's a couple of reasons why that's not true. First off, that's what everyone's doing. Like you need to work hard to be successful. That's like no shit. Now, if you're just trying to grind harder, then the easy way for other people to get better results than you is to just grind harder. So if everybody's here, you get here, they get here, you get here, and eventually you run out of time during the day and you run out of hours that you can just grind harder, bro. So it just isn't going to work. The other part of that is conditioning is your ability to match the energy demands of your sport, right? You've heard me say that if you've been following me on social media. And that means if you're a professional MMA fighter, as an example, take this and apply it to the sport that you are competing in. But if you're a professional MMA fighter, just as an example, you're fighting for either 15 or 25 minutes. That's it. Not diminishing that. That is not an easy thing to do. Your ability to fight for that long is like, I'm not trying to say that that's not hard, but the goal is not to be able to fight for 3 hours. The goal is to be able to fight very hard for 15 to 25 minutes. And you need to teach your body how to do that. Now, that doesn't mean that you just do 15 to 25 minute conditioning sessions, but that means we need to teach your body the high output and recoverability of those 15 to 25 minute fights versus just how long can I go before I drop. So what do we focus on? Number one, I always focus with my athletes on strength and conditioning work complementing the skills training, not taking it over. And what I mean when I say that is it is really easy for a strength and conditioning coach to build a hard workout. Pick 10 exercises, go to 100 of each of them with no rest. That's going to be really fucking hard. It's not going to build anything. It's not going to help you get better at anything. It's just going to make you suffer. Right. So if you're so beat up from the strength work that we're doing because it's random, pointless, hard work for the sake of hard work that isn't helping you with anything, then all that's going to happen is you're going to be super beat up and then you're going to have shitty skills training sessions and then you're not going to get nearly as good as you can be. Does this mean you're not going to be able to make any progress? Of course not. You can still make progress, but our goal is just not just to progress. Our goal is to progress as much as possible in as little time as possible. And you get that with number two, which is structure. Actually having an understanding of what you're trying to improve within every session that you do is going to allow you to put more effort into something that's actually going to make an improvement versus just leaving the gym being like, fucking nobody works harder than me, dude. And you're going to be able to get way better, way faster, and in turn become the best athlete that you can, which ultimately should be your goal. And number three, what I focus on with my athletes is progress over perfection. What I mean when I say that is there is no perfect training split. There is no perfect amount of training hours. There is no perfect amount of rounds of conditioning. There is no perfect anything. It's the best that you can do in the situation that you're in. So like as an example, I have a lot of people ask me, how many days a week should I train? And if you're working a 10-hour hard labor job outside 12 months of the year, that's going to be a different answer than someone who can just wake up and just focus on training, right? Because if all you have to focus on is training, train 6 days a week, train hard, train 3 times a day. It doesn't matter. You're good, right? Recover on Sundays, whatever it might be. But if you're working outside 6 days a week, 10 hours a day, if you try to train 6 days a week, three times a day, you're going to die. And I'm not saying that as a shot against you or anybody else. Your body's just not meant to be able to deal with that. So if you try to match that magical training schedule, it's not going to have the positive effect that it will for the person who just has to focus on eating, sleeping, and training, right? So the main thing that we always focus on with our athletes is progress over perfection, making sure that we are making you as good as possible in as little time as possible and continuing to adapt to whatever situation you're in order to make that happen. So now let's get to the energy system. System number one is the aerobic system. And fundamentally, I believe this is, as much as it might not be the most fun to train, fundamentally, I believe this is the most important one. Why? Because this is improving your ability to recover and maintain higher pace for longer while you fight. So basically, the aerobic system is what generates the most amount of energy for your body, and it can do it for the longest amount of time. So when athletes in the old days would, go for their 10-mile runs every day or whatever else they were doing, primarily they're hitting the aerobic system. Now, this is going to keep your baseline pace elevated, but it's also going to continue to regenerate energy while you continue to use it. So as you're throwing your punches, as you're shooting for takedowns, again, take this in context of whatever sport you're competing in. Your aerobic system is in the background. You're using energy, it's just regenerating. Then you're using more, it's regenerating more. So if this is well trained, you have a constant flow of energy through your fight. Now, the main time that I would train this, and actually let me say this before we get deeper into the systems. There's no perfect, you have to do exactly this at exactly this time. This is a general guideline, right? If you have 6 weeks till a fight and you know that your aerobic system sucks right now and you have no ability to maintain a high pace, then don't go into the other systems, go into this one. Same thing, if you're in the off season, let's say you don't fight for a year, it doesn't mean you can only train the aerobic system. Have a mix of everything. This is just a general guideline. Like if you're fighting every 12 weeks, the first 4 weeks, primary focus should be the aerobic system because that's building your baseline. And then we're going to get into the other ones after that. But that doesn't mean only aerobic system in the off season. And then we'll talk about the other ones in a minute. Hopefully that makes sense. I'm going to kind of repeat that when we get to the end of the video too. So as you use your energy, it regenerates energy so you continue to have more energy to use. When do you train it? Primarily in the off season. So this is further away from the fight because this is your baseline, right? You want to have a strong baseline when you come into training camp. You don't want to be building it while you're in training camp. So the main methods that we'll use to train the aerobic system is aerobic power intervals. So as an example of that, that would be 1:30 of hard work at the max pace you can maintain. And I'm going to say that you can maintain, again, because every time I talk about this online, I always have people commenting saying, you can't go at a max pace for 1:30 seconds. Like, yeah, you're right. That's why I said max pace you can maintain. And then 1:30 seconds to 3 minutes of full rest. And you're going to repeat that for anywhere from like 4 to 8 rounds. And when I say 1:30 of work, you can do this on an air bike. You can do this with circuit training. So like picking a couple of different exercises and doing 45 seconds each, 3 different exercises and do 30 seconds each. Vary it up, change it up, give yourself different stimulus to work off of when you're doing these sessions. The other thing I tend to use is aerobic capacity circuits. 45 seconds of high steady state effort, 15 seconds of rest. You're going to do 6 rounds of that. That makes 1 round, and then you're going to do 2 to 3 rounds of that. Now, the reason I like circuits for this one is because plain and simple, if you said go sit on a bike and just go for 25 to 40 minutes, I'm going to get bored as fuck. And that's just me. If you like the steady state stuff on a bike, that is a good way to build aerobic capacity as well. But for me, I like to be doing a little something different. So I like to give stuff like this to my athletes where you're doing some work, you're resting, you're doing another exercise, you're resting, you're continuing to work at that high pace, and then you're being able to do 6 to 8 different things within each set. So the main thing picking exercises for the aerobic capacity circuits is pick exercises that you can maintain a pace with, right? So it's like, make sure that you're doing something that's a steady pace that you can push hard with, that's not going to be at like a max all out effort. Now, system number 2 is the lactic system. And the function of this is to delay the onset of muscle fatigue. So we all know that feeling. You're working, you're pushing, and you start to feel like that wall where all of a sudden you don't feel like you're snapping your punches. You feel like you're pushing your punches and they don't have that same power on them. This is the lactic buildup in your muscles, and it's the lactic system that is going to continue to flush out those toxins from the muscles, continue to delay that wall from really setting in and causing an impact on how you fight. Now, I'm going to quickly reiterate again, when to train it. Early fight camp, 8 to 5 weeks out. This does not mean that this is the only time to train it. If you have a while between fights, work it into some other training cycles as well. However, the main thing is like early fight camp, when you have that good aerobic base built, Now, 8 to 5 weeks out, usually if I'm doing 2 to 3 conditioning sessions a week with an athlete, depending on the athlete and specific needs, my general overview is lactic system is going to be 2 of those 3 sessions. And then either, depending on the athlete again, either an aerobic power session or an alactic session, blah, 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 which we'll talk about in a minute, would be the third one. Now, the methods that we generally use for the lactic system is going to be a 20 to 60 second sprint interval with incomplete rest. So when I say incomplete, the idea is that you're never fully recovering. So we're teaching you to be explosive and then be able to repeat that without having the ability to fully recover between them, so that you can keep that power, keep that system flushing out those toxins, and continue to move explosively without hitting that wall. So as an example, this can, like, usually what we do is 1-to-1 or 1-to-2 work to rest ratios. So like a 1-to-1 would be if we're doing 30-second intervals, we'd go 30 seconds of rest. So like 8 rounds of 30 seconds of max pace work, 30 seconds of rest. Or a 1-to-2 would be 30 seconds of work to 60 seconds of rest, right? So you can play around with that a little bit within those work intervals. Now, same deal with the aerobic stuff. The main thing that you're looking for is pick exercises that you can maintain the appropriate pace with. So if you're doing lactic system work, it should be super high paced. And if it's super high paced, picking something like a squat is probably a bad idea, right? Because you're trying to do reps and continue to go at a super high pace for 20 seconds, but you can't really do that effectively, right? Whereas a squat jump, now you can keep that explosive for that timeline, right? So just think about, what am I trying to get out of this system? And then what exercises might fit. So like squat jumps, medicine ball slams, battle ropes, air bike sprints, regular sprints, off the top of my head, explosive push-ups, like things that are going to keep you at that 100% power for the duration of your work sets. Whereas with the aerobic system, we go to those aerobic capacity circuits. You can pick something like, even one thing I like to use is like a reverse lunge. So it's a high, steady pace. You can use a little bit of weight. You're not trying to like max the speed out, but you're trying to keep your legs under tension consistently for that whole minute or for that whole 45 seconds. Hopefully the difference there makes sense. Now, number 3 is the alactic system. And the function of the alactic system is maximum power. When you see that hard, just like 1-2 that knocks the guy down, knocks the guy out, that's going to be primarily that alactic system that's generating that power. And basically the way the alactic system interacts with these other 2 systems is, as the aerobic system's in the background generating you energy, the alactic system is going to use way more energy way faster. So you're going to be max effort explosive. It's going to drain it quickly. But then the idea is, if the aerobic system's well trained, it's in the background regenerating that energy so that you can repeat alactic efforts more often through the fight. Now, when to train it? Again, I've said it before. I'm not going to go into it again. There's no like only this time. Just make sure that you're incorporating it in where it makes sense. But primarily in your later fight camp, this is going to be the focus of your conditioning training. So the methods we use here is 6 to 15 second intervals with complete rest. Now, when I say 6 seconds, a lot of people right away are like, what? Like 6 seconds? That's nothing. Big thing you've got to remember, the goal here is not absolute fatigue. The goal here is 100% power. And after really like 12 seconds, that alactic system is fading. And if it's fading after 12 seconds, if you start going 20, 30, 40, 50 seconds, you're not working the system anymore to the same degree. But if you hit 6 seconds of absolute 100% power, you're hitting that alactic system. The way I like to do this is, if we're doing 8 rounds, I'll pick like 2 to 4 different exercises. So like, as an example, an air bike sprint and a med ball slam, I'll do the work interval, one on the air bike, the next one on the med ball slam, with that 60 to 90 to even 2 minutes, 60 seconds to 90 seconds to even 2 minutes of rest in between, to really make sure that you've regenerated all that energy and you're starting from here with every single rep you do. So the conclusion, number 1, work ethic welcomes you to the game. It does not separate you. The fact that you work hard is great. It is not going to be the difference maker. I hate to be the bearer of bad news. As hard as you think you work, there is someone out there that is working just as hard, if not harder. So the way you separate is not by just doubling down on more hard work. The way you separate is by structuring the training you do to get better results in less time, so that if you both put in 2 hours of work, you're up here and they're still down here because they're just grinding, right? You both put in another 2 hours. Now you're off the screen while they're still here because they're just grinding and you're getting better results from it. What will separate you is structure, hard work, and consistency. And actually, that brings up another really important point: consistency. If you grind your face off 6 days a week, your body's going to hit a point where you're not able to train anymore, or you're not able to train for a while because you're beat up, you're injured, some things are wrong, whatever it might be. You're going to have to take extra time off. But if you manage the intensity and focus on the actual intention behind the training you're doing and the results you're trying to achieve, you're going to be able to train more consistently at a better pace that's going to get you better results, which in turn, even if they train super hard right away and you're lagging behind, when they fall apart and they have to take time off, you're just going to keep growing. And my goal for every athlete we work with is you continue to grow and you continue to see benefits over time, not just massive benefit right away and then fall off a cliff when your body burns out. So what I want you to think from this as well is use this structure as a baseline, but understand there are always more complexities with an athlete-specific situation. Now, what I mean when I say that, guys, is like I was saying as we went through the video, let's say you've been away from training for a couple of months for whatever reason, and then you take a fight in 6 weeks. If you don't have that aerobic base built, don't think I'm in early fight camp, I need to focus only on the lactic system, because if you don't have that aerobic system, then all of those other systems aren't going to work as well. It's like trying to build a house without the concrete foundation. If you just stick walls into a pile of mud, it falls down really easily, right? But if you don't have that aerobic foundation, the rest of the systems aren't going to be able to function as effectively. So depending on the situation, this isn't always going to be perfect. I want to reiterate that. But this is a really, really good guideline to get you started, get you understanding how to structure the things together, and then move on from there. And guys, I just want to wrap this up by saying I appreciate you taking the time to watch this video. And if you are looking for more help with how to structure your training, send me back a message on Instagram that says energy system, and we can have a chat about our coaching programs and about how we can help prepare you for your next fight. So I appreciate you. I hope you have an awesome rest of your day. I hope you got value from this. Drop a comment, send me a message back. Let me know the value that you got. And if you're looking for more help, hit me back with the word energy system and we'll have a chat. Have a great rest of your day. Talk to you soon.